On my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or the public trust. I will always have the courage to hold myself and others accountable for their actions. I will always uphold the Constitution, the community, and the agency I serve.
Welcome to episode number 22 of the On the Blue Line podcast. We call this Monday Morning Roll Call, and I am your host and founder, Wayne Mulder, and I'm so thankful that you're joining us again week after week. This week, we hit 200 members in our closed Facebook group called the On the Blue Line Guild. We've got almost 850 members on Twitter and 128 followers on Instagram. And I know by some measurements that's not a great deal, but we are so thankful for the continued support. And then when you keep in mind that we've just been doing this for a few months, I am so glad that you're joining us, telling other people about it, and staying up to date with what we're doing on social media. So if you're not a member, whatever your preferred site is, please be sure to join us. The other thing I want to mention this week is we do have the Patreon account up and running, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of last week's show. The link for that is in the show notes. If you're not familiar with what Patreon is, it's a site that allows you to become a partner, pretty much financially, with a creator that you enjoy following and that you enjoy interacting with. It allows you to choose a support level which is set by the creator, and depending on the support level, there's usually certain niceties, little giveaways, and member-only benefits that the creator will put out there. Like for us, our base level is only $4 a month. So basically for $1 per Monday Morning Roll Call, we can join with our supporters, and there's some specific thank yous that we give away at each level, all the way up to what we call limited founder level. So if that's something that interests you, this support, it helps to pay for our day-to-day operations, to continue to bring you not only this content, but allows us to develop new content and offerings that we're going to be bringing to you in the future. So I really appreciate it. Patreon, it's real popular with podcasters and writers, artists, musicians, other creatives and other creators, and it allows those who enjoy that creative work to get more involved and kind of partner with them to allow the work to continue. So I hope you'll consider it. Please check out the show notes, and as an added thank you for the first 14 days of the Patreon account, all supporters that join us on there will get an On the Blue Line decal as just an extra thank you, and that's at any support level, including just the $4 a month. So I appreciate your consideration. That does it for the business side this week. The Monday Morning Roll Call starts now. So this week I wanted to talk to you about something more positive and uplifting. However, the tragic events of the last couple weeks has kind of put a damper on things and has led to a lot of discussion and questions in reference to firearms and the prevention of mass casualty incidents. And then, of course, law enforcement's stance on the subject. To the latter, let me preface this by saying that there is probably significant differences in law enforcement's opinion when you look at it across the entire United States, because there's vastly differing opinions in general across the entire country. And as I repeat over and over on here, law enforcement is composed of people. So it stands to reason that those fundamental differences are there, and there are likely some strong similarities due to training, education, and experience, but there's also going to be some strong differences. The other thing that I want to say at the beginning of this episode is that at first I was going to completely forego and stay away from this conversation. I mean, besides discussing politics specifically, it doesn't get much more divisive than going down this road and this topic of gun rights and gun restrictions. Of course, without having any actual empirical evidence, I'm inclined to believe that it may seem more divisive due to the media's incessant reporting and often skewed viewpoints. But again, whether that's the cause or not, there is a fundamental belief that we are a divided country on this topic. However, the more I thought about it, the more time I took to really consider my viewpoints on the matter, coupled with my understanding of history and my limited understanding of the law from my anecdotal experience on the criminal justice side of the house, I thought, well, maybe I should answer these questions. Maybe I should foray into these murky waters, because it is a subject that needs a common sense approach. It's an area that's begging for a positive spin and a hopeful outlook. So from that perspective, I'm going to go ahead and try to answer one of the questions I received this week inside our closed Facebook group on the Blue Line Guild. As I mentioned at the beginning of this show, on Wednesdays, I post the Ask Me Anything question, and then I try to answer it in an upcoming episode. Not always the next episode, but within one of the next couple episodes. So if you're not a member of our On the Blue Line Guild, our closed Facebook group, then you are missing out, and I would encourage you to go to the show notes after this and make sure that you join us in there. That way you can ask questions such as this one and also benefit from the other content that we go over on a daily basis. So here's the question. It came to me and it said, Wayne, here's a question a lot of us would like to know. Quote, what is your position on gun control, both in general as it applies to black rifles, which is in quotation marks, or what is termed assault rifles, or MSRs, modern sporting rifles. And how does that apply to handguns as well? Is an armed citizenry a deterrent to criminals? What do you think? And what about your fellow officers? What about command? Is there command pressure to avoid this discussion? Are the politics too invasive to allow probably cognitive thought? I hope you take on this. It should be interesting. End quote. Great question. Sorry, I can't read very well, but it's a great question. Now, let me discuss this a little bit at a time and dissect it just a little piece at a time. The you in this sentence or in this question is in all capitals. The what do you think? So making it very clear that the person who is asking this question is requesting a personal opinion from me as well. So please bear with me as I try to give you just that. And remember that it is okay to disagree with someone. You may not agree with what I say, but that's okay. In fact, this world would be very boring if we all completely agreed on everything and on every topic. And there would be no growth. See, when you all agree on the same thing and there's no differing opinions, you don't broaden your understanding on anything. You just solely stay in your little silos and information is never shared. So to take us to the next level of our lives, it's important that we get a broader understanding of people who disagree with us. So let's start there when it comes to this discussion. The other thing I want to do is I want to start by mentioning an article that came out this week, and it got a lot of media attention because the people who were pointing out this article were trying to make the very point that I'm going to try to make in the beginning of this conversation. So according to KTLA 5, it's a news station out of California, the headline on August 7th reads, quote, 4 killed, 2 wounded in a series of OC attacks, suspect arrested, end quote. The story goes on to say that a man killed 4 people and wounded 2 others in multiple stabbings at several locations in Orange County before being arrested on Wednesday. The police said that this 33-year-old Hispanic male from Garden Grove was arrested outside a 7-Eleven in Santa Ana after a series of robberies and violent attacks. And the lieutenant referred to this guy as pure evil at the news conference. So there was a series of events, and they all kind of began. So first they get alerted to a burglary that takes place at this apartment complex, and that's around 4 p.m. So they head over there, and the apartment had clearly been ransacked. Around 4:23 p.m., police get a report of a robbery at a bakery in this area. So no one was injured in that incident, but police were able to get a description of a vehicle in the bakery incident. So then around 5 p.m., the officers are called back yet again. And this time, the suspect apparently returned and stabbed 2 men who lived in that apartment complex. One victim was found inside the apartment while the other was outside. One was pronounced dead, and the other one later succumbed to his injuries at the hospital and also passed away. So then, at 5:40 p.m., the police get another alert, this time to a robbery in progress at a Cash and More. No one was harmed in that robbery. However, 25 minutes later, they get another call to another robbery in progress. So this guy's just running around causing havoc all over this area. And this time, it's at a Best One insurance agency. Well, a witness said that a female employee was stabbed multiple times before the suspect fled from that business. And police said that victim was conscious and talking and expected to survive. So she's able to give a little bit more information. Well, then they get alerted to yet another stabbing. This time we're at 6:09 p.m. And they go over, and this time it's at a gas station where a man was pumping gas. Suspect confronts him and attacks him. Witnesses reported seeing the suspect attacked with multiple knives that were machetes. That victim suffered a laceration to the face, and his nose was almost severed off, including he had several stab wounds to his back. However, that male is expected to survive. Around 6:25 p.m., law enforcement gets another call. This time, they see the Mercedes. It's at a 7-Eleven store. So they confront the suspect, and they find him with a knife and a handgun. He drops both of them, immediately complies, so he's taken into custody. Well, before they arrived, the suspect had disarmed a security guard inside the 7-Eleven and stabbed him, and he passed away later as well. And then officers at the scene learned that just before they arrived, the suspect had stabbed a customer inside the subway across the way, and they tried to do life-saving measures on him, and he did not survive either. So it goes on to say that there are no clear motives in this case at that time, and that robbery, hate, homicide, this is all the above. It's just pure tragedy right now, and that's the statement that the law enforcement agency made. Now, the reason I start with this tragic story is because there are themes. Here we have an individual with an arguably mental health issues. Now, again, I don't know anything about this individual, and I don't know that he's been diagnosed with anything, but I think it's safe to say in this conversation, we can say that there's something clearly wrong with his decision-making and his cognitive ability. So I would say in the greater sense of mental health issues, we can argue that they are present. And he goes on this rampage for an unknown reason, and there's numerous innocent people who lose their lives or are severely injured. See, these are the similarities to these other recent mass casualty events that have been all over the media. In fact, if you were to draw a Venn diagram based on what we know so far, and you would have in the middle section there, you'd have multiple victims, you'd have maybe mental health question mark, you'd have one assailant, and here is what is not in the middle of that Venn diagram: guns or knives. Now, you could possibly put weapons in the middle of it because that's a similarity between both of them, but you're not going to put guns or knives because that's not similar between this incident and the other mass casualty incidents that have taken place across this country in recent weeks. So because of all these differences, the problem is the questions that come out of these incidences about gun control, and that's the question that's asked this week. And they start coming up after these tragic events. And it's almost always driven by emotion and rather than well-reasoned decision-making. See, when decisions are made solely on emotion, they are usually not good decisions, and they're usually not common sense decisions. There's often a push to rush legislation in the aftermath of tragedy in order to not waste the emotional boiling point in hopes of getting whatever legislation they want pushed through. But think about this in your own life. Are your best decisions that you have made been when you're at a boiling point? When you're in crisis mode? When everything is code red? Is that when you've made your best rational decisions in your life? If you're not sure, maybe ask your kids. Ask them if when you're in this crisis mode, if that's when you've made the best decisions, when you're screaming across the house. The simple fact is that we are human. And in moments of emotional crisis, we should not be making big life-altering decisions. And Congress and the Senate is no difference. Rushing legislation solely with the purpose of trying to capitalize on emotion is not only foolhardy, if history is any guide, it will not be effective now or ever. And please do not be naive that when I talk about life-altering, that limiting freedoms, specifically outlined in the Constitution in the name of safety and security, the bedrock of our country, without which there is no United States of America, when it gets interpreted, that it begins down this slow descent, this watering down of the effectiveness of the Constitution, sliding away from the freedom that it guarantees and stepping closer and closer to ideologies that should truly scare every American. Things like socialism and communism. So, to the person who asked this question this week in the Guild, I hope you'll bear with me because I will fully answer the question exactly as it was asked. But as I sat down to consider this question this week, I believed very strongly that we have to lay some groundwork first. Otherwise, my answer is no different than the countless opinions that just ping-pong all over social media, with the intent of doing nothing more than upsetting the other guy, whomever that may be. So, in the sake of keeping these around 10 to 15 minutes, this is going to be part 1 this week, and then I'm going to answer part 2 next week, which will specifically answer the questions that you asked. But this week, I want to take a different approach, and this is in reference to any topic, any hot-button issue, any life decision, whatever you're contemplating. A few things have to be considered first, namely, what are the facts? In cases such as these mass critical incidents, several of them have involved firearms, and many occur and never involve firearms. So let's step back from the fray in the easy blaming the first thing that we see mentality and engage in some critical thinking skills. If firearms are not involved in every mass casual incident, can we say that the cause of mass critical incidents is firearms? If we cannot, then by removing them, if that could even be done, and more on that in the future episode, but if you could remove them all, would it stop mass critical incidents? Secondly, consider the idea of when these decisions are being made. If Congress or the Senate cannot pass gun control legislation when emotions are not running high and boiling over, as it has been in recent years, then is pushing through legislation when emotions are high a good decision-making technique? And secondly, is that what the people really want? Chew on that this week. If it isn't passed when people are not upset and shouting, and pushing it through when they are, is that truly what the people, we the people of the United States, the people who have voted for the representatives into their position, is that what the majority of the people want? So this week, When you're around the water cooler at work, when you are sitting around the office and you're BSing with your coworkers, when that crazy brother-in-law or cousin of yours posts that angry one-sided social media post, in those moments, I hope that you will consider what we discussed. Does the proposed solution have anything to do with the actual root of the problem? And if need be, draw them the Venn diagram. And secondly, is the decision being made, is it pure emotion? And if so, why? If we apply this kind of reason to more areas of our lives and our world, I can guarantee you that we'd begin to see positive change. So with that, thank you for joining me for this part of the conversation. That does it for this week's Monday Morning Roll Call. Please check out the show notes, follow the show links, or visit our website at ontheblueline.com, where we have many more links and much more information available. Thank you for listening. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Monday at Roll Call. And in the meantime, I'll see you out there on the Blue Line.